Hello, Bridget. Welcome to the Microdose podcast.
Hey Gareth, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for
Good.
coming. I'm going to
It's a
open and
pleasure.
just read a little chapter from this book called Mushroom Wisdom.
Okay.
It's by Martin W. Ball, who's a PhD, so he knows what he's talking about. But it's just the opening thing where he speaks about mushrooms. So he says, mushroom space is a divine space, a space of paradoxes, spirit, mind, meaning, beauty, and wonder. It is intelligent, alive, organic, flowing, transformative, fluid, open, inviting, playful, serious, insightful, sacred. It is chaos and order, flux and change, ebb and flow, life and death, immanent and transcendent. It is beauty. It is home. So, with that little quote on mushrooms, how would you define a hero dose of mushrooms, and how do you work
Well,
with that?
I guess we'd first have to ask, like, what do people constitute as a hero's dose? And I feel like hero's dose would be 5 grams and up, or at least a 5 gram dosage. So what would I define as a hero's dose? Is that the question,
Yeah,
basically? Yeah, I think, dissolution of space and time, um, a shattering of all paradigms, a tough look at shadow work, depending on who you are, because obviously it's going to magnify where you're at. So most people are holding a lot of shadows. So a tough look at shadows and a step into, yeah, a step into understanding reality a little bit deeper.
so what is your deeper understanding of reality then? Is that
Wow, Gareth, you've
that's
gone
a,
right in.
got right in there. We can pull
Okay,
back a bit.
okay.
We can rather,
No,
yeah.
it's so chilled. It's so chilled. It's so chilled. It's perfect. So my understanding of reality is that this is okay, so first I think it's important to say that, I've been working with this medicine and in this medicine space for 10 years. So it's a decade of working in this space. I've had a lot of clients, and I have been holding group and private spaces. So I have had a lot of time and experience with this. So my perception of what is reality then versus what is now is changing, because everything is consciousness, right? Everything is consciousness. And so at this point in time, so I would state, to answer this question, in my current station of identity, at this point in time, at my current level of consciousness, reality in this particular time matrix is a simulation. It is artificial, augmented imagery, and it's a fallen system. It's an entropic Fibonacci-based system, and it's highly sophisticated AI.
I'm curious, what leads you to think it's a simulation? Like
So,
if you work, like I'm just, because this is a question I guess wrestled with, because I think like you can get revealed stuff on mushrooms, but I feel it's quite natural and divine, but it can take like an AI technological simulation route. But yeah,
well, it's
do
certainly
you think the whole
divine.
thing
It's
is the
certainly
simulation,
divine.
or do you mean like our construct of reality?
Say that again. You broke up for a
Are you
second.
saying like reality as a whole, like the world and planet Earth, or is it like our construct of reality and what we define as real?
No, I'm saying the full construct, as in this time matrix. So we have many universal structures, or we call them echoes. So universal time matrices. But this particular time matrix, as in the Earth and what we call the solar system, etc., is for me definitely a simulation. And your question was, what leads me to believe this, or what leads me to make a statement like that is, I guess, moving through the evolutionary states of my own consciousness. So yes, I've worked with mushrooms for many, many years, but my passion and my interest and my drive has always been ascension. So what are we as the soul doing? How did we get here? How do we connect with God worlds? Obviously, my fascination would have changed. So in the beginning, it was just really like having a deeply intriguing mind and deeply intriguing consciousness as to the spirit world. And obviously working with this for 10 years, I'm inevitably going to be increasing my consciousness. It's my daily thing. It's not like I'm a medicine woman on the weekends and I have a corporate job. It's like 10 years of focus on what is consciousness, what is reality, how do we ascend, what does ascension mean? And so through that process of progressively expanding my consciousness, I've come to the point where I am like, this is a simulation, and I'm understanding more and more why it is that. I don't know if you want me to go in there, but it'll kind of steer the topic away from mushrooms and bring us to, I guess, a conspiracy theory space where we begin to look at control systems on the planet, which if we're looking at control systems on the planet, we would need to, or it would be wise of us to go back into galactic history and look at that which has occurred as a planetary system in this universal time matrix. And once we've done that research, we can clearly begin to see that timelines are repeating and that we're stuck in a system. And so when you begin to have that conversation of why are we stuck, why is it that we're stuck, why are we looping around timelines,
what makes you feel we're stuck?
Say again?
What makes you feel we're stuck?
Well, if we are a planet that is predominantly living in the frequency of war, pain, suffering, depression, and addiction, then I certainly believe we are stuck.
Okay.
And control.
Yeah, I'm with you on
and
the
control
factor.
Yeah, we are not, it's like each of my clients for mushroom ceremony work, or any work with me, I ask, what is your objective? What is your objective to do this journey? A lot of people from the more business and life coaching spaces might say, self-empowerment, self-improvement, things like that, which is great, but it's like literally just the first ingredient in the cake. It's like you're kind of missing the point, and it's a great starting place. It's a great space to kind of move into neuroplasticity and look at your issues and maybe solve aspects around depression and anxiety. But it is merely like the first ingredient in the cake. Because what are we? What is it that we're teaching as spiritual guides, coaches, or medicine people? Is that we are consciousness. And when we start to ask what is consciousness, we're like, it's energy. When we ask what is energy, it's quantum. And when we're going quantum or having discussions about quantum space, we're dealing with space, time, universal constructs, and we're really beginning to go into our multidimensionality as well as our kind of cosmic and galactic ancestry. So yes, that self-empowerment and self-improvement space is really just the beginning. And to some degree, yes, it is inspiring, yes, it is uplifting, but to some degree, there's still an ego layer there.
I'm sure it was a little Rolling Stones article or something that had like people are trying to use psilocybin to treat depression but are accidentally meeting God. It's just like kind of funny.
Yeah.
But I think that's it's the difference. I feel like if you work with these substances, it becomes a journey that it's like you become a spiritual seeker seeking something deeper from the experience. Correct. And a deeper understanding of stuff. But I also don't think, I don't know, I think there is like a divine hand behind stuff. If some people get lured in by the idea of personal development or empowering themselves, I find...
of course, there's so many layers, we have layers upon layers upon layers. And this is why I say once you get to this kind of space within, and remember, there's there's no right or wrong, or essentially there's no hierarchy, although it does feel like that. But we're in a spiral of creation. So in terms of what your consciousness seeks to engage with in order to grow is going to be different at different spaces on the spiral, you know. And what I've observed through my time doing this work, and this work, you know, could really be just described as an energy worker or a shadow worker, is that no matter if the soul embarks on a psychedelic journey or not, the soul is going to move through some sort of trigger event that's going to spark growth into their lives. And they may go, you know, to that growth may be positive, but it also may be destructive. You know, it's like a dark night of the soul. It may be destructive. And they may not go to psychedelics to seek assistance, but they'll go through the spiral. They may begin reading about psychology or emotional, emotional intelligence, or go to a psychologist, or start doing Reiki, or whatever it is. So the soul is constantly moving around the spiral of data. So where I've gotten to is the data organic or is it artificial? Because I'm obviously somewhere else on the spiral. So I'm exploring my consciousness in a completely different way because I've already done all the other things. So if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I've like a question for you on that, because you get like, you know, like already having an artificial and natural view of stuff, there's like an idea of separation there. And then you get things like a non-dual perspective, or like non-dual liberation through, like there's a guy who does like non-dual liberation energy therapy through 5-MeO DMT and stuff. But yeah, is there like an ultimate separation, or do you think there's other forces maybe behind pulling something towards like an artificial knowing, or as you're saying, like a natural? Kind of stumbled on my words. but yeah.
So no, it's okay, I understand what you mean. So, you know, in your description earlier you used the word divinity, and I said indeed it is. So whether it is artificial or that which we call artificial or natural, it is divine. It is part of God's source. It is something that is presented for the consciousness to figure out and work through, right? Because it's all God, it's all code.
Yeah.
So there is divinity in everything, whether it is that which we call artificial or not, right? It just depends on what your consciousness wants to experience. So you spoke about separation. Within the commentary surrounding having an artificial reality, we're still working, or I work with what we call the law of one. And this is quantum mechanics, right? So it's like understanding that we can move through, anger and grief and surprise and shock and paradigm shifts when we realize that this may not be the construct that we believe it to be. So anytime. So it's the same as going to a mushroom journey and having an ego death, and your illusions around religion might be shattered. So we're just continuously shattering paradigms, and
boundaries.
Once we shatter the natural versus artificial paradigm, we still have to come to neutrality. We still have to come to unconditional love and understand that it is within the one. So there is still divinity that lies within it. But again, it's asking the question, what is consciousness? And consciousness is energy, consciousness is creation. And then at a certain point on that spiral, when you've embodied enough of your fragmented soul aspects, because that's what you're doing, is you're recollecting aspects of your soul to recalibrate the DNA. And when that happens, you get more of your memory within the universal construct. And once that happens, you're going through a huge amount of data processing. And again, you more than likely will move to quite a lot of anger and grief, because it's intense. It's mind-bending dealing with these concepts, not only from a cognitive space where you can watch The Matrix and be like, wow, that's pretty sci-fi or whatever. But once you start to have memory of these things actually having occurred within within our experience, you're going to have to come to spiritual mastery where you're able to neutralize and ultimately come into sovereignty.
Well, yeah, I
as
think,
a creator, as a creator being, And that's where we're at the moment. Not many people are aware of the level of consciousness hijacking that is happening. I mean, there's many things on mind control and things like that, and psychological operations, psyops, and things like that. But the level of sophistication of the AI, meaning alien technology, is so huge and so it's like so transparent that you may not understand it, you may not see it, but it's so obvious when you do. And when that happens, your only job is to regain sovereignty.
Yeah.
Because what I believe is, you spoke about the separation. What I believe is, cool, we've got the two systems. We've got a natural system and we've got a fallen system. We're in a fallen system. But what I see from a fallen system, so it's not good or bad, it's part of source, it's part of God. But as part of that fallen system, what I also see linked very much with that is control.
Yeah.
So whether it's AI or not, do you want to be in a system where you are controlled to the nth degree, where censorship is this and that and da-da-da-da-da, you can't express, you can't be who you are, and you're relying on technology, you stop thinking, there's many things that can happen in that kind of timeline, and it's okay. But for someone like me, who's quite a natural, naturally orientated being, angelic being, I'm not interested in that timeline because I have memories of what destruction it's caused, and I want to be free. I want to be free. I'm a God being,
Yeah, I feel like as time progresses and stuff, like there's something putting us towards this crazy merge with technology and AI, and some like disconnect from Gaia or Mother Earth or your spiritual nature and stuff. And it seems like there's like a distinct pull, because at the same time, while there's like maybe a bigger contrast than ever, I feel more people are maybe being pulled into, well, geez, let me try this psychedelic thing, or there's a pull of curiosity back into like an archaic or more ancient way of being and being connected to the earth. Like now I'm sitting barefooted, like in some places they'll never, like that. Even now, like at schools and stuff, like that, every little kid has shoes on and they want to play in the mud, and this complete disconnect. So yeah, like before we go ahead, like how did you, to go back into this hero's journey kind of theme of like the hero's journey that you've taken to facilitate Ascension medicine, what was your initial calling to this, and when did that take place?
So I guess I've always been an oddball. I've always been different. I was always really intrigued by different religions, Hinduism, Buddhism. This was when I was like 11, 12, 13. Mystical spaces and places, dolphins and pixies and elves and all of those kind of things. And although that sounds silly, and you can say everybody, every little girl is drawn to that, it was a very big thing for me. But anyway, in my kind of already in school years, because I started school a little younger, so already in school years I was experimenting with mushrooms and cannabis, and I just, at festivals, I used to go to a lot of festivals. That was my that was my choice to participate in these experiences using mushrooms, and there was
also my kind of introduction to it, not at all like ceremoniously or something, but I wouldn't. Anyway, sorry.
And a lot of people just used to come to me and be like, "Hey, I'm having a bad mushroom trip," and "Hey, I don't know what to do. I'm freaking out," and I don't know how and why, but everybody just came to me, and I would be like, "Well, have you eaten? Have you slept?" have you drank water? Have you been mixing it with alcohol? You know, it's just like I just knew these things because, and every time I did take them at a festival, I would go by myself to, it's usually on a natural space of land and go and sit by myself. And there was just one festival I was kind of communicating with this tree, and it was so beautiful. And I just kind of got told, like, you need to do this. And then I kind of got a bit. So I hadn't done like a ceremonial dose, and then ayahuasca came in because there wasn't anyone in Johannesburg doing ceremonial dose. It was only just Monica Kromhout in Cape Town. And then ayahuasca was coming in quite a big way at the time. And I decided to go do an ayahuasca ceremony, which I was shitting myself for. I was like so terrified. And in that ceremony, I got told, you have to work with the mushrooms. And it was very interesting because when I connected with the shaman for the ayahuasca, I said to him, look, I want to help people with mushrooms, but I'm not a shaman. So, maybe I can market this thing and you can host the ceremonies. And he was like, just do the ayah first and then we'll go from there. And in the ayah, I got told, like, you need to do the mushroom ceremonies. And so I just began. And this year is actually my 10th year. But it is important to state that I am pulling more and more away from serving mushrooms because I am somewhat of a way shower, and we are moving to different spaces of embodiment. Once you move through it, you're like, that chapter is complete, and now I'm moving and doing more work in the quantum and I guess like spiritual sciences spaces. Yeah.
And I mean, did you ever feel like a refusal to this call at any point? Was there ever a wrestle or just straight?
No, not at all. I was doing a lot of corporate kind of entrepreneurial courses at the time, how to build your business and things like that. I spent a lot of money on that, how expensive these things are, self-development, personal development. I had worked on the yachts before, spent all my money on the yachts, from the yachts on personal development courses in order to start a business.
Yeah.
And the business was, Omni Life, this work. So it's 10 years in now, but no, there was never, ever a resistance. I just had to have the conversation with myself, like, this is an illegal path that you are walking down. Are you committed and ready if the day comes to be arrested, if that happens? And the answer was yes. And so from that conversation with myself, I began, because it was very important. And you must understand, like, now it's quite a trend. There are so many people you can go to. Back then there was one person in South Africa, maybe a couple of underground people, but ayahuasca was more in the forefront, and it was one old lady and then myself. I was like the second, from what I can tell, it was like the second facilitator coming in and being very bold to come into the social media space with this. Now again, every Tom, Dick and Harry you can do work with, which is again why I'm shifting and moving, because I'm always ahead of the trend. And yeah.
And why do you think you were called for mushrooms? I've had a weird one before. I also been on like a high dose of psilocybin, and it was like, you need to work with us and share this with people. It was like a weird, okay, like,
Yeah.
I've had a conversation with a mushroom or two in my day, but for me there's been like a reluctance. Like, I've held a couple ceremonial spaces for friends. I've never actually said this publicly, but and it was super powerful, but it's for me it was quite taxing energetically to hold the space for people, and I also had to be in like such a monk grounded mode beforehand to even like attempt to hold the space.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's not for the faint-hearted. It is It is big work. And, you know, when you start out in the beginning, you don't know. You don't know how big it is. You just start. It's the beginning, you know.
Yeah.
But when our kind of reset timeline came in 2020 for COVID, it was just before that lockdown time where I needed a break. I was doing a lot of ceremonies. I mean, yeah, it was intense and I needed a break. And I actually did a 9-gram mushroom ceremony a week before lockdown.
Good
So
heavens.
I was processing a lot after that. And through lockdown and the time spent, only then did I have enough time to integrate what it is that I'm actually doing. And with the reset and through that reset, having a consciousness shift, a timeline shift going, oh my God, like, what is your job, B? You know, like, this is insane. You are dealing with souls. You are dealing with consciousness. This is not a game. This is not a game. And this is also why I'm stepping a bit out of the field, because it's become so much of a trend and it's going to become a dangerous space.
Well,
number one.
you know what's...
Number two, I'm a bit of a trendsetter. And number three, it's this aspect around understanding that this field is pretty much artificial. So we have to begin to ask ourselves, what are we tapping into when we are expanding our consciousness, particularly during a time where consciousness hijacking is an agenda. It's an agenda of the elite, you know.
Well,
so
this is where, like, another interesting question opens up, because there's something very different when it's done ceremoniously and with someone with a connection to, whether you want to call them helping guides or spirits, and someone with the energetic power to protect and hold the space. And that's something I've experienced more than once. And it's very powerful to experience. And if you haven't experienced, you'll be like, oh, whatever. And you'll, you know, like, kind of, where I know people that are administering mushrooms and stuff, they've never even done a high dose. They've never even tried it. You know, like, they may be like a psychologist,
Correct.
or something to that
Correct.
degree, but they've got
Correct.
no idea of the landscape people might walk into. And then that's the other one for me.
And possibly doing it in a like a therapy room.
Yeah, and like,
You know, like an office, a doctor's office.
and unprotected to a potential, like, psychic or entity
Correct.
attack or
Correct.
something to that degree. And yeah, for me, I was interested, what is the difference between like taking these substances at a party or something where you're not energetically open, which as I think probably a huge amount of people's first time is probably in this jaw kind of space, and then versus maybe Western, like a traditional Western therapeutic thing, like you're saying, like you're in John Hopkins in someone's little room or something, or versus like the ceremonial aspect. And what do you think the difference and benefits might be of one versus the other?
Well, I mean, it's huge. So, and again, this is why I've come to like a stop point, because even though I have 10 years experience and 3,000 clients through the door doing high dose or hero dose journeys, that's a lot of experience. That's a lot of experience, even with that. And I've worked with some phenomenal souls who have exceptional higher sensory perception, and you know, there are certain gateways open to information. Even with that, in the now point that I'm at, with the information that I have, I'm like, oh my God, we are minions. We are tiny, tiny, tiny little minions acting as masters in a universal construct that we don't know how it functions in its mechanics. And this is why I'm at creation mechanics at the moment, because only through correct mechanics, meaning mathematical and sacred geometric sequences and structures, can we truly, truly, truly protect ourselves and know that we are okay to begin to open up. And that's me only experiencing this now. So I've been collating this data for 4 years, but only now am I beginning to practice it. So in essence, even though I held an excellently held space, even though I had other very, very strong medicine people and, you know, multidimensionally active seers and things like that, we're literally playing with each other's consciousness, like in these spaces. You know, so it's like we have to understand that everything that we're drawn to in terms of taking action or whatever is something that our consciousness is there to experience. But once we uncover more and more data, and that data is more conflicting for the psyche and therefore shadow data, you look back on the past and you're like, oh my God, I let that energy healer touch me. I let these people, whatever it is, like it's so, let's say we are so porous in our energy fields, or our auric fields, or our light bodies are so weak and weakened that when we jump into psychedelic space and open up, it's a shit show. It's really, really potential for a shit show. However, you know, as much as I say that, I can also say, well, maybe my last 10 years has been a shit show, but fuck, here I am working and looking at ancient history from 950 billion years ago and beginning to work on these techniques and the correct electrotonal coding that activates the DNA, that connects me to a more organic structure. So what are the differences? Most of what I've just said, people will be like, what? Like, I thought we were talking about mushrooms, you know, but now you imagine a psychologist in a room. They don't know any of what I'm speaking about. None of it, you know. So yes, are there therapeutic benefits to taking, and do you need to have all the information? No. But is it my responsibility as a spiritual guide to say that at this time we need to be very, 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 very careful? And this is why now it's like, if you're going to do any medicine work with me, we got to work for like 6 months beforehand so that I can begin to teach you the correct meditation sequences to anchor in a 12th dimensional field, which is connected to Christ consciousness, so that we have some sort of stability in the light body in order to safely go in and open up. And even then, I am a humble student, and I'm humble enough to say I am still a minion.
Yeah.
And yet I'm an excessively and extremely strong medicine woman or soul. I'm a very ancient, you know, soul. So yes, I have knowledge, but I'm still young.
Yeah, like for me, the difference with the ceremonial stuff at times is it seemed to like evoke a deeper sense of healing and meaning, and
healing and meaning. Yeah, that's a nice one.
For me, yeah, like I mean, I've heard it said before that the difference between medicine and poison is the dosage, you know, and that's the other one, like, because I think there's, like, I heard, like, well, for me, like, golden teachers are the ones I love to work with, but, you know, they're supposedly great for emotional trauma, and then if you have someone with a lot of emotional trauma to work with and you give them, like, penis envies or something, then it's often, like, too much to handle. The experience is too deep, so
correct.
It's kind of playing with the doses there. And yeah, so for me, in the ceremonial space, it opened up on my personal thing, like a dimension that was kind of evoked with certain songs and by like an opening prayer and incantation or whatever you want to call it. And then I've sort of met similar guides along the way every time I do it in that ceremony, and it feels like the space is protected. And not to say like there's a good or bad trip, but I've had my fair share of encounters with what felt like negative or evil entities, and it can be utterly terrifying in that psychedelic space and quite like traumatic.
Yes.
And almost every time it's been when I have not had a clean or good lifestyle before, or I've overdone the mushrooms, or my ego's come and gone like, okay, show me how deep this really fucking goes, and you know, then I get the hiding of my life. So I've also heard Terence McKenna.
What is your highest dose been?
probably like 8 grams or so. I feel like, see, I did ibogaine. Like, this might sound, this is gonna make me sound like, but anyway, I did ibogaine a number
It's
of
okay.
years
We're talking
ago,
about
and
medicine.
I'm
Yeah.
convinced that it reset my tolerance for mushrooms, because I
Got
feel
you.
like I have such a tiny bit, and it takes me to like what used to be 3 or 5, like 5 grams. So many
Yes.
long is now like 2, and I know like the
Yes.
kind of space and how deep it is, and it's like a lesser dose. And then I like
Yes.
ask other people, and I'm like having this entity, other realm encounter, and it's like, oh, you're like, oh, just a little bit of visuals, So
Yeah.
it's like a
But you see,
different.
this is where your facilitators come in, because we have to understand the soul. Each soul is at a different space in their consciousness. And, if you've done that amount of work through whatever it is, you're in essence we're clearing traumas. And the more we clear traumas, the more we have space for an opening, so a consciousness expansion and a sensitivity. Once that's clearing it is in, you can take lower doses and really be vibrating, because you already have that frequency match within your body.
Yeah.
I watched my ex-husband take, 4 grams of mushrooms and 350 mics of acid for breakfast at a festival. Like,
Yeah.
if that was me, I would be, yeah,
Yeah.
flying spaceships and stuff. Like, but he had so much trauma upon trauma upon trauma upon trauma, that he was so desensitized that it didn't matter. It didn't matter the dose. It didn't matter. He
Yeah.
was just looking to bypass and escape, bypass and escape. So, this is where working with a practitioner really helps, because we can spot immediately, where your extrasensory gifts lie. What is going to be too much for the nervous system, because you don't want to re-traumatize people. And yes, if people are coming to you often, you may need to go into a big initiation dose, like my 9 gram and my 8 and 9 gram, which is in the middle of the desert, no lights, no nothing, no candles, no nothing. So yeah, I mean, a nice example of what you asked was, I once had a guy come in and he was like, look, I need to communicate, I need to connect, and I want to do a ceremony. And I said, okay, cool. He said, this is my only date, but I did a mushroom ceremony 2 weeks ago for myself. So I said, well, I'd prefer a little bit more time, because you've already just gone into that space. He's like, no, I want to do it like, 2 weeks time. So I said, okay. And this was a private ceremony. And he said, well, what if it doesn't work, because I took the 5 grams and I didn't feel anything. And I was like, Jesus, okay.
Yeah.
And I said, well, look, it's my job. It's my job to open up an energetic time-space capsule and continuum.
Yeah.
That's my job. It's my job to do that. So come in. And he took the same strain, obviously, my batch, but the same strain, and he was, in his 5 grams, and he couldn't believe it. And I was like, look, when you do it by yourself, and again, this is not hard and fast. The higher self and the higher aspects of the soul are going to take opportunity when a lesson needs to be learned. So yes, you can be on your own and have a hugely shamanic experience.
Yeah.
It can be very traumatic. Usually on your own, it is, but sometimes the role of the shaman is very, very powerful, necessary, and assists you in really opening the centers. So that you have, a kind of more sacred experience, rather than this like lustful, I need the communication, because you're dealing with consciousness.
Yeah. So why do you think people would be called to work with mushrooms, and when do you think it's a good idea for them to work with it, maybe ceremoniously? Because for me, I like gauge people, and some people, I think my dad should, try work with you, or maybe you can recommend him someone. I'm like, and then I know the dad. I'm like, I think he'll be better off with the psychologist. Like this might be a bit too much. But
Well, again, I think
why
anyone is capable. Anyone is able. I mean, I've had my oldest client at, I think, 73 years old, and I've had my youngest, like, ceremonial client. It was his 16th birthday. Him and his dad did it together, right? I think it depends on your facilitator. So again, someone who is older is, like you say, your natural inclination was to say, I think they should stick to a psychologist. Now, if I were to ask you why, you would be like, well, if I were to say why, the simple question would be, there's so much programming. If he does this, it's going to freak him out.
Yeah.
Right?
I've been wanting to give my 90-year-old grand mushrooms forever, but I think it would snap her brain. But,
so again, it depends on the level of indoctrination and programming. So if that, person in their older years or whatever, or just highly indoctrinated person wants to do mushrooms, or has been suggested by someone else to do it, because that's also a difference.
Yeah,
is the soul calling them, or is someone suggested? Then it's all up to the facilitator and good consultation of checking that person out and being like, you are not ready and you may never be in this lifetime. Or you may be ready, but we're going to have to do a year of ego delayering beforehand. Or we're just going to do a 1.5 gram walk in the forest, and not a big shamanic dose, because we've got to start working with zones of tolerance, and the body is filled with so much trauma, especially older generations at that age. They've done none of this kind of work. To go to a psychologist for them is even embarrassing and daunting, and they feel shameful. So, and this is the tricky part, because sometimes they're like, oh, let me do something naughty and cool, and instead of go to the psychologist, which I don't want to do, let's go take these psychedelics. But it's like, you better be careful,
But
that's just an ego move,
We're speaking about it being like a trending topic, and then it's easy to hear one psychedelic session can be 10 years of therapy as like an enticing idea that comes out. But then it's people that have not done any of the work, and then either they have such high expectation of this grand experience, and they're just, like you said, there's so much blockages that they're not met with that experience, or it's the opposite. And it's just so overwhelming. I've witnessed and just partaking in ceremonies, people go through that where they've either slept through the whole thing, or they didn't experience anything, or they've had a whole twisted view of what's happening, and I've experienced one where the lady, she was an African Christian, and this was her first time, and she had been called to psychedelics, and the first one was ayahuasca, and I was like, good heavens, that's really fucking diving in the deep end from my perspective, even though it can be gentle.
I don't know, I think the mushroom dive is the first one is way
depends on the dose. If you do a gram of mushrooms, I agree with you, the high mushrooms.
I'm saying shamanic dose.
But you have not done anything, and then that's anyway, so mid-ceremony she thought that this was a satanic cult, and everyone was about to be in an orgy together run by the thing, and she just freaked out and started trying to disrupt the whole ceremony and stop everything, because she knew what was happening. And I was in the space, I was like,
but you see,
her ego and her programming is clinging on so hard, she can't surrender to this experience.
So yes and no. So this is what's interesting. Yes and no. With that particular share, it's yes and no. So we have to look at the cultural background of people as well. So you've got an African woman. The African people are very, very open. So whether they are still in this Christian colonized, indoctrinated system, their systems are actually quite open to the spirit world. So why I said yes and no is it could be a huge level of indoctrination, absolutely, particularly based on the Christian values and faith that she has. And it's often the most difficult. So any South Africans that are watching will know we have Afrikaans people that are hugely Christian based, and I often, when deeply indoctrinated Afrikaans people come in, I'm like, whew, this is going to be intense, right? Because it's all of that religious programming coming up. So that's the yes. But the no part is because that woman was so open, and when you go deeper and deeper and deeper into creation mechanics and understanding the fall of the system, she could very well have seen precisely what she mentioned, as in a satanic cult and and orgies, because
they're
when we
out there,
begin to uncover, so it's not happening in the 3D, but multidimensionally, we've got a shit show in the astral dimensions of entities just feeding off of people and energetic systems. And this is exactly why it's such a dangerous space. And we have many, many practitioners relying on the medicine, which is amazing. There's nothing wrong with that. But we don't know anything about the mechanics of creation. And actually, our rituals have moved into mimicking each other, and moving to, I guess, it's like this mimicking and ritual processes of prayer for, the natural world. But we may be calling in archangelic structures. We may be calling in tribal structures. We may be calling in ascended master structures. But when you understand the artificial intelligence in the system, you begin to go, whoa, this is way too much responsibility, because archangelic structures, as well as ascended master structures, as well as many other entities, can come in as light and be false light. And this is why I say yes and no, because we are in a satanic system. That's what the fallen system is. So it's very interesting that you mentioned that. So could it be the indoctrination and absolute fear of letting go? 100%. But could she have been 100% correct in her evaluation of what was happening multidimensionally from an entity perspective?
Yeah.
She very well could have been. And that's what we need to begin to realize.
Yeah, that there's these higher energetic and entity forces at play. Like to go into the simulation one, I've done Changa twice, my closest thing to the DMT experience, and I don't know. I mean, I can't. It's ineffable to describe with words. But my experiences on mushrooms and ayahuasca can be very earthly and cosmic and organic, but also very cosmic and out of this world and universal. And I feel like I've gone into cosmic hallways and bizarre worlds. But on the Changa, it felt like I went into the only thing that felt like it was the control room of the simulation. Like there was a kind of machine Kinesh thing that tried to engage with me, and it was the only way I can describe it. It was it was the most 4D thing and the most like universal defying construct that I entered in for a couple of minutes. And that one wrestled with me for a while, because that was when I was like, everything's a simulation, that was the fucking control room or something.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was like my most bizarre experience with that. Anyway.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's like we, certain of us on the planet, are again looking at creation. What is this creation? And then therefore, if and when you are opening yourself up, and I mean, to open oneself up on psychedelics is a huge opening. It's huge.
And that one I did so irresponsibly. I was drinking and playing music. It was like when I was way younger.
Wild. And so what we're beginning to explore is that many people think they're going into the source, meeting source.
Yes.
But we have to ask, how many sources are there?
Yeah.
So it's the source of the source of the source of the source of the source. But if we're just in the source of this particular hypothetical simulated reality, then is it the source? Is it God? Or is it just the source of this universal construct,
I didn't
and when we're opening ourselves up, are we going into hyperdimensionalized spaces, or is it the organic God? And that's where we're at now, is questioning this, because the fallen system has been looping for so long that clearly we're looping around hyperdimensionalized realities. That's where I'm at,
But that's because there's a quote by Voltaire. It's like God is a circle whose circumference is nowhere and center point is everywhere. It's something like that. Paraphrase. Like his circumference is nowhere and
Yeah.
center point is everywhere. So it's like at the center of all those multidimensional universes is God, and
Yes.
its circumference is bound in that totality
Yes.
of all. But when I went into that space, that was like my most wild memory that sits at the back of my little brain at times. But I didn't get this intuition that it was like the source behind everything. It was just like, geez, that was a hell of a dimension to stumble across, you know.
And it's also interesting because you mentioned Ganesha, and we
Yeah.
need to start asking, who are these gods? Who
So
are
how's-
these goddesses?
The next morning, I went to go stay at like a not very close friend's house in the wilderness, and at the parents, they allowed me to stay in their lounge. And above my bed, after I'd had that experience at night, was a stained Ganesh glass in
Yeah.
the house above my bed, and I was like, well, like fuck, like it's not very often that happens to me. There's a stained Ganesh window above like where I'm gonna sleep. So it was a weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, weird.
Because once you look at artificial timeline wars versus organic wars, you begin to understand that these gods and goddesses are AI. They're artificial. Because and this is what happens in ceremony space. We go, okay, we're calling in the ancestors.
Yeah.
We're calling in these archangelic structures. We're calling in these ascended master structures and these beings. And it makes us seem as facilitators like we're in the know and we're connected to these worlds and these spirits and these deities. But why are we not going, I command to connect to God? That's it, because everything else is a distraction that has potential to siphon your energy. And this is the refinement of where we're heading to now, or where we're going to need to head to. Because again, even if you take like the kind of mysticism away from gods, goddesses, and deities, look at the gods that we are revering, whether we believe it or not, on this planet, is technocrats. Our Facebook owners, our Telegram owners, our technological our Google owners. You may have whatever ideas you have about Bill Gates and all of that, but they are the new gods in this timeline. So we've got to have this perception change of bring everything back down to energy. Where are you giving your energy? What are you consenting to?
Yeah.
Because in the other multidimensional realms, based on this fallen system, you might be continuing to loop and feed a system that is no longer sustainable. And this is the danger in shamanic work at the moment. And it's so crazy because had you ever had this conversation with me 4 years ago, I would have been like, yes, amazing, and it's not that it's not, but in my group of colleagues, work colleagues, let's call it that, like, it's so fucking pinpoint specific now that if you show a photograph that has what we call metatronics, meaning it's an inverted system, you are called out by council immediately. And by a photograph, I mean, I had this the other day. I posted, the kind of high top on one of the trance dance floors. And there was a big dragon as well. And it's like, I got called out, like, B, you need to take that down immediately. It's full of metatronics, this, and this, We're not even talking about medicine. We're coming down to energy, symbology. So your Ganesha above the bed is like, what symbology is that holding, and how is it restricting you from connecting to true source organic architecture that is, from the pre-matter sound fields down into material existence?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like my take is, that presence to and that connection to all, or God, or totality. It's that clear. The best symbols maybe the Tai Chi one or something like that. But or it's a simple fucking circle, but yeah, like, but there's so many different aspects to it that maybe gods represent and embody those different aspects, but then that's like like the analytical symbology side, and then there's the side where you like experience meeting multiple gods or something in these kind of spaces at times. Like I've had like an Anubis meeting. I've had like what's the blue guy, the Hindu Shiva. I've had, but yeah, like and this energetic like this knowing that it wasn't just a little creation in my mind. It was something real that. Which is an out of world experience.
Again,
but
so if we
there's
think
still
of Hinduism
that
and
distinction
Shiva,
to me that it's not all. It's just a part of the all. It's like me meeting you, and so I'm not meeting or like having that encounter, being like, oh my God, that's the all-knowing entity. It's like, oh, that's like another manifestation of God in infinite expression in another dimension.
Yes.
Some, I don't know.
Yes. For sure. But again, like I say, when we come to the refinement, let's say you have a whole entire Indian population. It's India, man. It's like highly populated. And you have these people doing puja day in and day out to these entities.
Yes.
Not to God. Do you know what I mean? Yes, it's part of God's source particle. So like you say, it's a manifestation of, but if we go, okay, cool, that's beautiful, it's a fact. So they are doing that. As
opposed to the worship.
But we are still in suffering, we are still in pain, we are still in war. Yeah. So something needs to shift in terms of where our prayers are going to, where our energy is going to. Because how is it that a population of India prays and prays and prays and does puja and puja and puja.
Yeah.
And I might upset some people here, and it's not to upset you. It's just a conversation, take it or leave it, But it's like, how is it that we are still in perpetual war and suffering and control of our consciousness? We're feeding systems that we need to start asking, are these beneficial to us? So of course an entity can appear as grand and beautiful and part of a particle of God's source. Like you said, you described it very well, but most people that would have that experience would be like in awe and be like, fuck, now we got the statue up on my altar, etc., etc., etc. And again, you're diverting energy into systems, because if everything is micro to macro from this quantum perspective, which fucking system are you feeding? That's what we need to start asking ourselves.
Have you read Non-Dual Liberation?
No, but I'm reading the Freedom Teachings.
I haven't read it. I've just started, but it's funny because he wrote this book, Mushroom Wisdom, and it's it sounds like you 4 years ago, and the non-dual sounds like you now. Of like his experience from this pull from like all these rituals and things things that at the end of the day human constructs to this non-dual view of stuff.
Correct.
So just to go, like what role do you think the ego has to play in all this, and even during a psychedelic experience? Is it something that we should shun and let go of, or can it serve us in some ways? And what lessons are there around the ego and the soul in the psychedelic experience?
I think it can always serve us, and I think that's the point, is to have it serve us, not for it to be in control. And most people don't know it's in control. If you've got a really 3D kind of NPC player, they don't know it's in control, and it's just trauma. I mean, ego is just a protector. It's a safekeeper, and in essence, it's there to limit you. But if you're using it within a certain level of awareness, it can be a very, very powerful participant in your reality construction from the God view perspective, because you begin to ask yourself at every action, at every moment, in every creation aspect of your life, is this coming from ego? Is this coming from ego? And when we're asking that question, we start to ask, well, what part of me is it feeding? Which trauma is it feeding? So it's such a great teacher. You asked about ego within the ceremony space. Wow, I mean, it wants to stay safe and comfortable. And, when you can no longer, and you have that big shattering ego death, I mean, when you are holding on, I've seen some shit that I'm just like, wow, and that's what you really want to avoid as a facilitator. I'm not saying the avoidance of the ego dissolution. It's never death. It'll always be there. But you want to avoid these big dissolutions where people have propensity to move into a bit of a psychosis during these experiences, and it's okay. We're trained to deal with this, but energetically they need to have done a bit of work beforehand, and this is why. If you see facilitators that are quite quick to have you come in and take the 5 grams without preparation and stuff, be very wary, because actually, again, we're dealing with soul contracts here, not only the ego, but, I hope that answers the question.
No, for sure. I mean, I had it wasn't done. Like the ceremony and preparation and stuff was done in reverence, and I did the prep properly for my last ayahuasca ceremony. But afterwards, is it the dissolution where you're like disconnected?
It's like dissolution of space and time too.
No, there's another term. It might be that, but I kind of had that for a month after, where I was just disembodied. Yes. Maybe that's.
Yes,
there's a
probably.
better term. There's a proper term for it, but anyway, I
so
had
you were
that.
integrating.
Yeah, and it was quite a hard space because I had stuff to do, and my partner was going through some stuff because her parents were immigrating and stuff, and but I felt, because I'd had similar ones before, but I was like, I just needed to trust me, I'll be back, but I was still kind of floating between worlds for a while, which wasn't part of my plan. but I think it would be really interesting to unpack preparing for these ceremonies, and like you said, like some people you work with 6 months, or like some people you need far longer, or far less. And what does that preparation look like, and also the integration? Because my biggest thing is, it seems there's a big missing link for so many people in the integration process.
Yeah. So, I mean, preparation, if we were just going to go through the textbook, to prep for your experiences, you've got to clean up your diet. I think one of the strongest things that I could say is even beyond the diet, people may freak at me about that, but even beyond that is to get off of technology beforehand. To get off of technology, no series, no Facebook, no scrolling, none of it, It
has way more of an impact than you think. I had one where I'd watched so much Mr. Robot, and my beginning phase of the trip was like Mr. Robot's inner dialogue. And I was like, oh my God, this isn't my voice. This is the character in the TV show's voice. Anyways.
Correct. Exactly. So that's exactly it, So we have these subconscious patterns that come in through the program.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's not your experience, and you're quite, you're on your mushrooms, and then you realize, no, I'm actually playing a character right now of a TV character that I've been watching. And this is the thing, in preparation for me now, it's like, I want you to sit in a 3-day vision quest at least. I want you to go without food for 3 or 4 days. Can you do these things and sit with yourself and sit in the discomfort of that before going into opening up your energy field and your psyche? Can you do those things? That to me is preparation. So, and yes, of course, we have like ego dissolution and ego delayering techniques like breath work and things like that. I very much use breath work through my processes. Say again.
To use music or sound.
Yeah, in the ceremony,
Yep.
you mean? Yeah, it depends. It depends because again, when you start looking at the overlays, we call them overlays, so artificial overlays, music can be, and obviously there are incredible producers out there. There's exceptionally incredible shamanic music, but again, when someone like me, the depth of how I think, I'm like, fuck. The silence is better. But of course, you need to assist your clients through it as well. It's hours and hours. And if you move into theta and allow essentially you want the nervous system to be as relaxed as possible beforehand. As relaxed as possible beforehand. That means you're in a state of receiving. This is a good space. So ego delayering through breath work afterwards to move through any traumas that are sitting in the body. That's a great one. If you can do like a vision quest or something beforehand, where you're just sitting with the self in space and time, a great one. Most people, if you go to Thailand, for example's sake, people are going there on healing vacations, and you see a little, banner up there, shaman available, and you kind of book him for Saturday. It's a Wednesday. That kind of stuff to me, that doesn't work because we're playing with, the more your consciousness increases or expands, the bigger and bigger and bigger you understand this system to be. And when you understand it at that magnitude, you understand the magnitude of working with an individual soul consciousness. It's not a game. It's not a game, And then also to hopefully your facilitators have some sort of, documentation to go through, a questionnaire, so that you start dealing with a bit of questions around your belief systems before you go in, So there's a couple of things you can do. Yeah.
And in terms of integration, what do you...
I think integration, so for me, I feel like there's so
That's
much...
a hot word at the moment.
Particularly for me, if you're working with me, there's so much preparation work I want to do so that I know that your auric field and your light body has some sort of... resonance to the 12th dimensional Maharic shield, so the planetary shield, before we go in. So for me, it's more preparation. The integration is, I am here for you to sense make, because you're going to have questions.
Yeah.
So it's sense making through coaching sessions.
Yeah.
But the preparation for me, where I'm at, is like, we've got to go through a truck ton of data first, and I need to begin teaching you how to work with these geometries, doing daily practice. There's also something called sacred songs, which is implementing the first language of the universe, which is called Anuhasi. So we start anchoring in and building your 12th dimensional shield before we go in. Afterwards, again, it's just sense making. So that requires support and a facilitator that is able to answer questions.
And yeah, I know you kind of touched on it in the beginning, but the idea of doing shadow work before, what can, I guess, not working or understanding your shadow before a psychedelic experience entail? Because if you confront your shadow in a psychedelic experience, like, it can often magnify and reflect your deepest flaws that you've been denying or repressing, and it can come up in a million different forms as a message or a traumatic experience, or maybe even an entity. So yeah, what's your idea around shadow work, and how important is it before and after a psychedelic experience?
Well, it's very interesting because, again, I think it depends on your facilitator as well. because yeah, let me just say that. Okay, so it depends on your facilitator, how much of your shadow that they can already see prior to the ceremony. So if they have capacity to see that, to intuit it, to feel it, to understand it, they can begin to implement a protocol in order for you to look at those things prior to going into ceremony. And essentially, however, it may be more cognitive work. So you're calling someone else out on their own bullshit. You're calling them out on where they are in cognitive dissonance. And you're having conversations around this. Yes, we can go into breathwork and somatic release and trauma release of these things. But if the ego is really in the way, you can have a conversation about shadow as much as you want. The ego will reject. You might go to bed and be like, oh, my therapist really upset me today or whatever. So you'll still be resisting it. So there's that part of preparation. And this is where I guess a dose of good medicine is so powerful, because it's not coming from anybody but that experience. So, and it's now pushing you into it so all that the preparation does in terms of cognitive conversation versus the ceremony is maybe giving you validation that, oh shit, that which she saw, that which my therapist saw is indeed true. And maybe I can come to humility with this information now and receive it. Had those conversations not happened prior to ceremony and it's coming through, well, it may, each soul is different. And again, your facilitator is so important, because if you can because everything is frequency, if you can allow them to come into humility, if you've done a really powerful briefing and you are empowering them to deal with the shadow humbly and gracefully and all of these things, then that's just what it's going to be in ceremony. And again, if it's a big kickback in resistance, well, you're going to have an excessively dramatic ego dissolution, where you're kicking and screaming and trying to run away, and you're demanding that this stop immediately, and that you've been poisoned and all of these things. It depends on the soul. Yeah, and afterwards, again, it's just conversation support, integration, and responsibility, because you can look at shadow and have it shown to you, but you can also reject it as well.
No, for sure. And I think, like either you've heard of shadow work. It's one of those ones where it's like a popular term nowadays. Like you get shadow work and archetypes, but they're actually like very complex, but also simple to define. It's like the hidden parts of ourselves. Where shadow work can have this like, what is it, like a magic, like it just sounds a bit magic-y or something. Because I think a big part of it is working through these denied parts of yourself.
Correct.
And they can be when you've been manipulative or lustful or lying or mean or full of rage. And then why that's like hidden by the ego in your psyche in the first place. But it seems like the more you unpack it and integrate it, it tends to like fall back to this like fragmented part of the soul, like you said earlier, that probably took place at some point in your childhood, or it could be a past life. I haven't personally gone that far, but I know people that have had those experiences. And so I know like quite a part of shamanic work is the idea of soul retrieval, and it's almost like a similar term for inner child work in psychology, except you're like inviting that part of the fragmented soul back. So what is the power in the shadow and the darker parts of you and maybe humanity or others? Where does the power lie in working with that stuff on psychedelics and integrating it? Because it might sound like, if I integrate my rage, like I'm just going to be an angry person, or maybe from the outside.
So I'm going to just take the word psychedelic out of there, as in what is the powerful part of working with your shadow is the following. Is one, I think it allows you to step into humility. Two, it allows you to begin to associate more with another, and the other that you perceive as outside of yourself, and begin to understand their actions, thought processes, and the way their dramas unfold in their lives, by coming into compassion, because you now begin to recognize that, oh wow, they're just functioning from a space of trauma or hyper regulation, So through that, it allows you to unify more and come into unity consciousness. It also allows you a sense of, I think, wisdom, because, you can be, it's that statement of being cocksure of yourself, that ego. And it's just like, within the wisdom comes the grace, comes this like archetype of the elder, where you just hush a little bit more, and there's just the sense of a more grounded nature, and essentially we're integrating our shadow. It's not to banish it, you're integrating it, it's part of you, and this is where shadow work and sexuality is very interesting. And I'm not saying that this because I've done any coursework, but it's a very interesting space, just from personal observation, where you're like, wow, I didn't know that this aspect within me existed, and it's very scary because it's not been looked at before, but here it is, it's fully present within me, and so from self-exploration, it's incredible. From consciousness expansion through further self-exploration and actualization, it's beautiful. And, most of what we're talking about now is individualized consciousness shadow exploration. But once you've done enough of that, you begin to, you kind of begin to blossom out. Let's use that word, blossom out into more collective shadows and more cosmic shadows. And it gets, and this is why we started with this reality construct is artificially augmented. Like, that is fucking big shadow work to deal with when you start wrapping your head around it. And start looking at galactic history and the shadows of our seeding, the fall of the angelics in this system. It's a lot. It's deep. There has been a lot of war, and it's mostly what the shadow is going to bring up is grief. Grief. Where you're just like, oh, wow, I didn't know. I wish I knew better. Everything is better in hindsight. Everything is better in hindsight. So I think you just become more of that Buddha-style person where small dramas fall off of you a lot easier. You're not involved in tiny little fucking dramas that are based on projections. You've integrated. You come into this knowing, I know who I am. And the bigger, the more you expand, the bigger the shadow aspects that you're dealing with. Again, I mentioned the individual consciousness, but as well as cosmic and galactic, and it's all one anyway, right? So you start dealing with the shadow of the God mind, maybe. And like I said, this aspect around AI and things like that, it's forever unfolding.
And to bring it back to Ascension medicine, I know, and I mean, there's more than one, but Ken Wilber's model of consciousness, it starts with archaic, then magic, then mythic, and it kind of builds up, and you build up to this rational mindset, and then it builds from there to integral, and I guess the ultimate would be integral and one. But the thing with ascending and transcending different modes of consciousness is the one missing piece is to transcend and include. And I think the problem with modern society is we've started on this rational, analytical mode of consciousness without incorporating and including magic, mythical, to eventually get to integral and that we're all one, and even just simply just the Earth, never mind starting to look at galactic stuff. But
that's why I say it's it's the spiral. So we can say that human beings are not there, but it's this system is also encourage them not to need to go there with their consciousness, not to need to explore magic, mysticism, and all these steps. But inevitably, the soul is going to begin to want to tick those boxes.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're an NPC, which these are real things on the planet at the moment, you're not going to ask questions about your existence. But if there's still some sort of spark within you, you should be curious as to, who am I? Where am I? And what is this? It's like, I think it's fascinating, and it fascinates me that people don't ask those questions.
Yeah, and they'll tell you. I don't ask those kind of questions.
Yes, exactly.
They're scared
I got to fight. Yeah.
Ask themselves. So yeah, what would your ideal? I don't want to use the word optimal. It seems a bit like Andrew Huberman or something. But what would the optimum or the greatest expression of ascension look like for you?
For me?
Yeah, and also just because it does seem to me like there is a general growing of curiosity and more esoteric topics like this, or a deeper dive into why we're here, and that seems to be expanding all the time with podcasts, and I mean there's so much access to this information in that artificial technological space, but I think it starts to reflect that inquiry inwards to to asking yourself these questions. So yeah, what does your idea of ascension look like, and what does it include, and where is it transcending to?
It's a very interesting question, particularly based on the timing, because when I say we, I say myself and a certain amount of souls on the planet, planetary grid workers that are asking the same question, because we are in a reset time. We are in end times. And I don't say that to scare people, but we are moving through a reset. And we have to begin to ask ourselves, so again, myself and those assisting the planetary ascension cycle, particularly as teachers, which I am, need to ask that question. Do I have the answer for it at this point? We have certain theories as well as documented factual evidence that has come through, or factual, I mean, this person experienced it, that's come through the freedom teachings and the Melchizedek Emerald Order Cloister teachings. And so we are in this space where we're exploring these Keylontic sciences in order to understand ascension, not just as a imaginary, pipeline of what we believe happens when we die, but it's truly mathematical, and it's extremely technical, because we have to link to stargates, and we have to understand how to open stargates within our DNA structures.
What does that mean?
And the theory at this moment is, if we don't do it within a certain point in time during this reset, then we all burst into stardust or go in again back into a black hole system. There's like a Wiesadrek system, there's a Borger system, there's all these false AI systems, and it's like, we need to be very careful now that if we make a mistake, we might suck back into this reincarnational cycle that is an AI simulated recycle, that is not an connected to source system. And so what is ascension to me now is a focus on liberation, is a focus on sovereignty, is a focus on, dare I use this word, but protection and understanding of what consciousness really is. Meaning, if this is a quantum reality and I am God, sovereign and free, then at any point in time, I'm speaking into the quantum space, commanding with it. But I don't wish to I don't wish to work with certain aspects of ascension. And ultimately, everything that I'm saying comes down to unconditional love. And as ridiculously simple as that sounds,
yeah,
ridiculously simple as that sounds, to be in the purity of this space, in the purity of the innocence of a child, but the wisdom of a fucking dragon and God itself, to be in that frequency is mastery. So my perception on Ascension at the moment is, yes, I'm moving through learning of the mechanics, but I'm not scaring myself into an ultimatum drama, which I believe will repeat a timeline that is urgently needing me to save the planetary system to achieve these certain activations, or else I'm, space dust. I don't believe that is what we're here to do again and fail again at. I believe if we truly focus on shadow work, and it'll get darker and darker and darker, and come to a liberated state of being and understanding quantum and commanding that space like a computer programmer, commanding that space at every moment. That is Ascension to me, and that is liberation and freedom, even though I live in an interdependent system where I'm not separate from the construct, which will come into more control.
Yeah.
So even though you're experiencing more control, how is your mind, your sorry, I'm feeling a lot of energy come through now. How is your mind, your sovereignty, your consciousness free?
Yeah.
No matter where you are, no matter if you are shackled down. That is Ascension to me.
Yeah, I think for so many people that are stuck in a state of control, and that, as you've said, is programming from the media, it's programming from where you live, your ego. It's not my idea, but I feel like plant medicine or psychedelics might be one of the best shots we have out there, because it could fast track people to become more aware of the complexity of consciousness, more aware of their own energetics, more aware of their spiritual dimensions inside, and
Yes.
obviously aware of the shadow side, and just how complex these layers actually are to move forward. So it's you just don't know.
But we also have to ask why it's become so popular.
No,
why
yeah,
it's
so
become
it's
so
like
popular.
It's just definitely
Why
like
it's being
a trending.
pushed. And this is where we start to look at the shadow aspects of agendas.
But I don't
So,
think it's being
yes,
pushed
you
from
are
the
so
top.
Right you are so right in the aspect of it being such a powerful tool to open oneself up and be like, oh my gosh, I am consciousness, I
Yeah.
have choice, I'm part of the one, right? Those are usually, or I'm love.
If there's a
part of
mystical
you,
experience,
yeah.
that can be the outcome. Yeah.
Yeah, but again, when you're traversing more data within the universal construct and we bring in good old AI,
Yeah.
then it's a whole nother thing, because there is sophisticated alien technology out there that can block. I mean, we don't even need sophisticated alien technology. We have, we have pretty poisoned planet. We have vaccinations. We have all of these things. So, the technology. We're in a highly technological space, and we need to look at that as part of consciousness as well, and be very cautious as well. But yes, you're not incorrect with these experiences being like a catapult into being like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I'm a player here.
And funny, from those experiences, probably like the catapult into why we're in this technological expansion in the first place, like Steve Jobs and those kind of people having insights on psychedelic experiences. But
Yeah.
it seems like, I know there's a super wild podcast, a lecture with Terence McKenna from years ago called The Eros and the Eschaton, and he speaks about novelty and how every complex system creates a more novel and complex system out of trying to make that system simpler. Like, for example, like the steam engine for a train to like transport
Yes.
A to B is now this crazy car polluted planetary
Yes.
system. And then I think the Eros is like this creative force of the universe, which is constantly creating and expanding and multiplying to some
Yeah.
complexity. And then the Eschaton is this moment where, in his view, it's like time isn't being pushed backwards, it's being pulled towards this omega point, where it feels like there is some end point or reset point, like you spoke about, that this,
Yes.
like when you step back, because it is, I guess it, yeah, I mean, if you just think of like the shadow side of technology, it is very hard to take a step back and think, fuck, where's AI going to be in 50 years? Like, this is fucking terrifying.
Well, this is the
I'd
thing
rather
is
just
it
scroll on my
never left.
Instagram,
It's
you know.
always been, because we're thinking of AI in the 3D sense of what are the people, what are the humans designing.
But even just
And
in
this
that context, so before, I mean, before we
Correct.
even span
Even
out
that
to
context
a
is difficult for
potential
people,
other
and that's
one.
what I'm saying. When you understand the cosmic, the galactic, artificial intelligence, and you're like, oh my god, we think it's new. It's
Yeah.
so fucking old. It's so
I know.
ancient. Like, and it's mind bending because again, people are thinking of programs and little cool little like
Yeah.
chips in your head and walking away. It's like, no.
Well, we're in this like human assisting phase where it's easier to write and do tasks and things
Yeah.
and automate things that we wouldn't want. But yeah, like the baby's out the water with that one. Like it's I don't know, the snowball effect is rolling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've had that one like I think after the DMT experience, it was like, was that one of the endpoints where we just so plugged in that I tapped into a future realm of that was where it's going. And I just somehow jumped across time, and now it's like this DMT mechanical technological realm.
Yes.
Like, is that this inevitable ascension for us? Because it seems like we're going to merge with technology and become something else, and I think it's quite hard to fathom at this point, but
Correct. And
seems like
to
it's
further in
going
that
there.
statement is if we aren't already merged to it.
yeah. Well, yeah,
Because
I mean, we like
you
techno
start looking
music
at the
for heaven's
you
sake.
start looking
you
at the
know?
human body as well and being like, oh my god, is this the most functional design? And this is very difficult for me to say because as a medicine woman and a naturalist and someone who's done sport and I'm like and someone who trusts in her body, like, and I'm like, yes, I do, but I'm like, this is very interesting now when you look at these constructs and being like, why has it been designed in this way? Da, da, da. Basically question everything. So that's my reality. That's how I live. But
Yeah.
it gets interesting. Yeah, it can be fun, but be careful because you can wig yourself out a little bit, very quickly and very easily. And this is also what we're seeing is psychosis is going to rise and rise and rise and rise and rise and rise and rise.
Well, I think it's the disconnect, and it's the disconnect from your mind and your body and your soul, and I mean whatever other levels there are. But like when you watch shows of or hear articles around psychedelics, but for me that little one points at it like funnily where it's like people are using mushrooms for depression and accidentally meeting God. But it's like if you're accidentally meeting God, you're accidentally having the experience that you're a soul. And you weren't maybe out to get that experience. And it's that disconnect from maybe your terms like your light body, but that there is a soul guiding you towards stuff, and then there's your ego, and then the million other constructs and forces trying to pull you to, just even eat shitty food, buy shitty products, do shitty jobs.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, in the hero's journey.
And I wanted to say as well, like I needed to say this is important because you asked me what is ascension for, and I gave a beautiful answer. But ultimately, the answer is accountability and responsibility of your consciousness. That is what ascension is to me. Accountability and responsibility within the kind and graceful purity of the innocence of a child's heart,
Yeah, and I think your consciousness creates your thoughts, which create your deeds and actions. And the reason there's so much fucking fucked up shit is there's just a complete disconnect from the
Correct.
source of consciousness. And
Yes.
so then it's just run on
Yes.
these ego systems.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so just to wrap up, even though I steered so far from the theme of the hero's
from
journey
the hero's
questions,
dose theme, yeah. But
but
it's been a good one. I think we've touched like some really good things. So
no, I've enjoyed it. But yeah, so in the hero's journey, the hero always, after facing these trials, vision quest, there's a meeting of the goddess, which might be meeting the divine in some psychedelic spaces, and then after they've gone through all these trials and tribulations, there's a return home, and the return home is like the person that left is not the person that's returned, and what they've grown and learned is now being shared. Um, how do you feel you are embodying the lessons you've learned, and what's left to share with home?
yeah. So I think how I'm embodying the lessons that I've learned is very much got to do with my nomadic lifestyle at this point in time. Because as I observe the structures and that which I have learned through, dedication and commitment to this path, I see the traps and I see the pitfalls, and I'm kind of like a divergent. I want to explore. I don't want to just be like, hey, this is my business. I do a mushroom ceremony every month. I want to be free. I've mentioned sovereignty,
Yeah.
sovereignty in my consciousness. So mastery is my my kind of true north, and sovereignty is my true north. And I think that's how I embody, meaning, I work much less on client work because you've got everything out there. You've got Instagram, life coaches, you've got fucking everything. If you're resonant and there's a resonant field, you will find me, but I'm not playing these big marketing games anymore. Yeah. I'm not playing this game of ceremonies every month. I'm not playing this game of needing to take money from you. I really feel like I embody the universal laws, and through me being nomadic, it's kind of like this quest of the Christ, Yeshua, where I just walk and I see where I'm gonna go, and I have faith in my holographic field and in the creator that I am. So I'm playing a much bigger game, but through that bigger game within my quantum field, I have less clients, less money, less clients, less money, which to me is quite a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful embodiment task, because, yes, money is part of our experience, but is it spiritual? Is it God? Is it this? Is it that? It's like, no, spirit is spirit, I mean, yes, energy is money and all of that, but it's like, can you play this game as sovereign, powerful, strong, independent, fierce, graceful, with nothing? Can you walk into a room and people are like, Jesus, is she royalty? Is she a queen? Is she a dragon? She sure feels like it. And then you may ask, and I'll be like, I've got nothing. I've got my backpack, my tent, and people that I'm brave enough to speak my story through. Because in my hero's journey now, also part of the embodiment is these teachings of the Melchizedek Emerald Cloister Order, or the MCEO. And it's time. It's like, it takes a lot of time to move through this. So I'm in study. That's how I'm embodying. Every now and then I come into service space, but I'm in study now in preparation for when things get more difficult in this planetary structure. Traditional business models are going to fall. It's all going to fall away. And I will be able to hold the grid of people that are in pretty tough situations mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And then there's no invoicing. There's no business. We got to band together and, I got to allow you to feel the God body within me and spark the recognition within you. My hero's journey is leading me to, some pretty big work. Kind of tackling government kind of work as well. Like, I don't know. It's big. Because I'm stepping out of the identity of medicine woman, It's so much bigger than that. So much bigger than that. So, yeah. Thank you. Super cool conversation. Thank you, Gareth.